Alrighty, this is the 5th video on harm to self and others and breaking confidentiality. If that is the case, we'll actually just start with harm to self, although almost all of the same criteria apply when we talk about harm to others. So when somebody discloses that they want to hurt themselves, we make sure that 3 things are in place, really 4. That they have a plan first, the means to do it, and the intent to do it. Absent any one of those 3, coupled with an emergent that it's going to happen soon, we would not need to break confidentiality. So I'm going to go through each of those elements and then give some examples. So when we talk about a plan, somebody has to know how they're going to kill themselves, and it has to be a plan that they could carry out. So if people do not have a plan, if they say, oh, I'm just going to kill myself, well, how are you going to do it? I don't know. They probably aren't there yet. People who really do want to hurt themselves typically are fairly organized around that. So they will know how they're going to do it. I'm going to go home this afternoon. I'm going to play with my dog. I'm going to feed him because I want to make sure that if my body's not found for a few days that he's still fed. And then I'm going to shoot myself, take pills, do whatever. So they have to have a plan to do it. It has to be a realistic plan as well. I once had a kid say to me, Miss Sarah, I'm going to kill myself. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about that. How are you going to do it? And he says to me very indignantly, Miss Sarah, have you eaten the cafeteria food? I'm working at a school. Yeah, okay, cafeteria food's not great. And I say, well, yes, but you know, what's the plan? And he said, I am going to eat the disgusting cafeteria food till it kills me. And while the cafeteria food was bad, and while it probably would raise your cholesterol over time, it's not an organized plan that you're going to die of. It also lacks that idea that it's imminent. So it's not going to happen now. It's going to take many, many years of high cholesterol to have a heart attack. And given this kid was 12 or 13, it probably was a fairly safe plan. I didn't need to panic. I did have to not laugh as a worker because it was kind of one of the cutest plans anybody ever had. So you need to have a plan. It needs to be an organized plan. It needs to be a plan that people could carry out. So if you're going to drown yourself in a lake and you don't live near a lake and it would require a 12-hour train ride to get there, you don't have a plan. So we're really looking for, is it a plan that you could carry out reasonably as well? So do they have a plan? Lots of people have plans. You may have played the cocktail party, which is the best way to die, freezing or burning or some other weird thing. So many people have a preferred method. That does not necessarily in and of itself mean that it's a plan. People may talk about, well, if I ever got cancer and was at the end of my life, I would do X, Y, and Z. Again, fine, unless they have cancer and are at the end of their life and all of the other elements are met. So again, when we're looking at the plan, we're looking at, is it a realistic option? Is it a plan that they could carry out in the next 12 to 24 hours? The next thing we look at is, do they have the means to do it? If you're going to kill yourself by gun, do you have a gun? Do you have the pills? Do you have a knife? Do you have an automobile? Do you live near railroad tracks or a bridge that you're going to jump off? Do you have access to get to any of those in a realistic way? And so again, we're looking for, does this make sense? A lot of times we can remove means, especially when we're working with families. There may be a caregiver or a parent or a friend who they're willing to give the gun or the pills to. And so that's an option. So even having plans and means doesn't necessarily mean that we break confidentiality and start talking about hospitalization. The more lethal the method, the more concerned we are. Men are more successful at suicide. They tend to use guns. However, women try it more often. We tend to use pills and knives. And so because those are not lethal, there tends to be lag time between when you take those pills and when you die, or when you cut yourself and you could die. Whereas a gunshot wound to the head typically is pretty successful. So we look at lethality. Again, Does it make sense that this is a way somebody could die? Many ways that you could kill yourself are fairly accessible. You don't need a gun. There are websites where you can Google how do I kill myself, and there are lots of examples out there. It also has to be lethal. So if somebody tells you I'm going to take 27 aspirin, you probably get sick. If you did that over a long haul, it may not be good for your liver or kidneys, but it's not going to kill you in the short term. Taking a lot of your psychiatric meds won't kill you. You take 30 Paxils, you're going to be sick. You're probably going to be sent to the ER. If somebody finds out about it, you're going to have your stomach pumped. That's the worst part. But it's not going to kill you necessarily. And so we're looking at lethality, very important when we consider that. So plan, do I know how I'm going to do it? Means, can I do it? Do I have the gun, knife, car, pills, bridge? Intent, do I intend to do it now? Okay, and so this becomes a judgment call as well. Again, many people, it's not abnormal for people to say, oh, if I ever had to die, this is how I would do it. Do I intend to do it in the next immediate time frame? And that can be anywhere between 4 and 24 hours, and you have to assess that with somebody. Just because somebody has plans and means and intent, if the intent is not imminent, it is not a reason that we would hospitalize somebody or break confidentiality. A good example of this is my mom talks about if she gets cancer and she's really old and blah, 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 she's going to gas herself in her car with a bottle of wine. She talks about this all the time. Now, my mom is 60-some, and she doesn't have cancer, so I'm not terribly worried about this. Does she have a plan? Absolutely. Does she have means? Yes, she has a car and a garage and a rubber hose. Does she have the intent to do it? I actually think she might if she had cancer. However, it is not imminent. And so without that idea of an imminent risk, I can't act. I would not be liable. When clients disclose suicidal ideation, one of the most important things as a social worker is we don't want to panic. Lots of times, clients will use the word because they're in so much pain, and this is a way that you know you'll get help. We do want to react as if it's very, very serious, however, by starting that screen for plans, means, and intent. This would be a case that you may want to get your supervisor involved, and so you would just say to a client, I'm concerned about this because it's really serious, and I want to make sure that my supervisor is comfortable with this. Lots of times, however, if a client discloses suicidal ideation, all three elements plus the imminent risk may not be present, and you can do what's called a contract for safety. And this is an agreement between you and your client that they're not going to kill themselves in the next 24 hours, and they're going to check in with you typically the next day in the morning. You write it out, you have the client sign it. You may have to take additional steps like getting them to call a friend or a family member that they're willing to stay there, or give their weapon to, or to be supervised by. And so there's a lot of options. Just thinking it does not necessarily mean that somebody is going to the hospital. If somebody does disclose, and you do a screen, and they meet all of the criteria for plan, means, intent, and imminent risk, then you're going to work with your supervisor to reach the local crisis hotline or psychiatric facility. This could be the ER, it could be a regional mental health facility, it could be crisis care who will do an additional screen. But they're going to ask a number of questions, primarily around plans, means, and intent, in order to help you get that person hospitalized. People can be hospitalized in one of two ways. They can be voluntarily hospitalized, and that's when they agree, yes, these are not good, I need to be kept safe. Or they can be hospitalized on essentially a police order or a court order, called a 5150, because folks did not consent to be hospitalized, but the risk was so imminent that we had to violate their civil rights. And that's what it is. When we hospitalize somebody against their will, it is a violation of their civil rights. You're an adult. and to keep you involuntarily detained for 72 hours for an assessment. That's the most we can keep you until a medical doctor evaluates the need. There may be instances where people are so psychotic or so depressed that they cannot communicate to you whether or not they have plans, means, and intent. And again, we would work with supervisors at that point to make sure that we're doing the assessment and have them seen by medical personnel in this case. You're going to have a lot of questions about suicidal ideation. And some of them will be talked about in class. This is also a really good topic to talk with your supervisor about. Some of you may never come in contact with this. If you were working at, let's say, food stamp eligibility, or you were doing case management for international adoptions, this may never come up. Other kinds of work, it's likely to come up a lot. Mental health, adolescence as well. The more planning that people have done, the more concerned we are. So if somebody has gone out and purchased a gun to kill themselves with that plans mean combination, I'm more concerned. We used to believe classically that people would give stuff away, that I would make plans for my funeral, that would be the case. Sometimes that is the case, although sometimes there is absolutely no sign whatsoever. We're calling that impulsive suicidality, mostly seen in young people, adolescents and young adults, where they're not following what we used to believe was a traditional protocol kind of killing yourself, which was those letters and giving your stuff away and that sort of thing. So be aware that there aren't always clues. People go back and are like, oh gosh, I should have known. Maybe, maybe not, especially if it's an impulsive suicide. So again, when in doubt, you're staffing with your supervisor. I think even post-MSW for the first year and a half of my practice, if it was anything that I was at all unsure about, I talked with my supervisor about it, or I talked with the psychiatrist on duty. It's just a safer way to go. It doesn't necessarily mean that your client will be hospitalized either. So they may be evaluated by the ER or by the medical docs and not meet criteria. They could have been like, okay, they're taking it seriously now, or they may have changed their mind. There are lots of things, but we do want to kind of keep that in mind. Lots of class discussion about this and lots of questions, which is totally normal. So yeah. All right, the next video is going to be harm to others, which is very, 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 very similar with plans, means, and intent to harm to self.